is down below. Nope. Okay, continue. You can see the dock down below, and then you can see the high water line that I'm climbing up to above me, which is pretty neat. So huge tidal exchanges, which were a lot of fun to work in, a lot of big life, a lot of whales, some very intense diving, very cold waters. So that was really neat, and I really enjoyed starting my career off as a marine biologist. Eventually, I decided to dry out a little bit and do some terrestrial science, and ended up getting swept up by a really neat project at Cornell called the Swallows of the Americas Project, where we studied all 9 species of Tachysonetta swallows, which are pictured here. The one on the top is your tree swallow. And then the golden swallow is the 4th one down. And this genus of birds, what's really special is that their entire distributions, when you overlap them, they span the entire Western Hemisphere all the way from Alaska down to Patagonia. So they're a great model for doing life history work and looking at changes in clutch size, everything that you can study latitudinally. So what was really neat about that position is that it gave me an opportunity to not only get my feet wet with birds, but also to travel a lot and to see a lot of neat birds and live in a lot of different countries and learn Spanish and ultimately meet my wife, Marisol, in Argentina, and all these great things. And that picture of me down there, you can see I'm standing by a nest box that's actually covered in snow. That is the middle of the summer in Patagonia, all the way down in southern South America, which is just a crazy place to be. Middle of the summer, you can get snowstorms that just blow in. It's a really wild kind of end of the world place. So eventually I took one of those swallows and I said, I really want to study this one. And that was the golden swallow. And I said, I would really like to make a master's project out of that, because I'd really gotten my foot in the door with Cornell by that time. I'd been actually an employee for Cornell for about 3 years and decided it's time to be a student again. I chose the golden swallow because I thought it would be a really promising project, and it had gotten a little bit started and it needs somebody to kind of pick it up from there. So I really like the photo in the bottom right. That's ice all over the place in that pine forest. So this was one of my first times ever going to the Caribbean when I started this project, and I picked the spot with ice and snow, just around the corner from Pico Duarte, which is the highest peak in the entire Caribbean. So it's a really neat spot to be, because within an hour's drive, you're all the way back down on a Caribbean beach. So the habitats change with elevation very, very quickly. Neat place to study. So I studied the natural history and the breeding biology of the Hispaniolan golden swallow, and that's it right there. Beautiful bird. The English name golden swallow is a little bit off. In Spanish, they call it la golondrina verde, which is the green swallow, which I think is a little bit more appropriate. You can see in the photo on the left, you can see kind of that green shine, and you'll see some more photos. And the photo all the way to the right are some of the chicks that are getting ready to fledge in a couple of days. So they're just beautiful birds. Let's see. So what did we do? Well, we built a lot of nest boxes. We knew these birds. I knew from my work with other Tachysonetta swallows that most of the Tachysonetta, well, they're all cavity nesting birds, but some of them really love nest boxes. They just take to them. Others will not. Others, you can put nest boxes up and they just refuse to go in them. Just too artificial looking, I guess. And so when I showed up to this field site in the DR, there were actually already some boxes on trees. Some of you might know Jim Getz, who's done a lot of work, continues to do a lot of work in Haiti with birds and with conservation and with people. Jim had actually been up in the DR putting up some boxes for these golden swallows a few years before I got there, in an effort to try to attract some breeding birds to these areas to see if we could start a study. And so when I came in to help with that, we took it from there, and what we realized is that Jim had done a great job. The birds were there. They were definitely starting to arrive. They were using the boxes. The problem was we couldn't defend the boxes on the trees. They were using them, but they were being slaughtered by black rats and mongoose. And it was really hard to rig predator guards below the box, above the box, to keep, because these rats, black rats, are arboreal and can climb almost like squirrels. Very incredible. And so we decided to start moving the boxes to posts where we could defend them, where we could put up anti-predator guards and keep these birds safe over studying them and why they were trying to nest. And it worked out very well. The birds took to the boxes. We ended up, each year we were down there expanding the network, and this is just a view from up above, and you can see over about a 20-30 mile range, pretty much every field, every opening, every old agricultural field we could find up there, we put some boxes in, and honestly had really, really good success at most of those sites. You can see the numbers as they went up over the years. And that motto worked very well and continues to work very well today. There's a few groups that have taken over these studies and taken over caring for these boxes, and the grids of nest boxes continue to expand. And so it's been a very successful long-term effort to use these nest boxes for this population. So that's the bird. That's your golden swallow right there. It can look blue, it can purplish, it can look a lot like a tree swallow because it has that white belly. They, of all the Tachysonetta swallows I worked with, are some of the fastest moving, most agile flyers and the most difficult by far to photograph. So pretty much I have thousands of blurry shots of these birds, and these are some of the few that weren't. So an incredible bird, very small, very fast, about 13, 14, 15 grams. So considerably smaller than a tree swallow. And what we wanted to do as well is document any natural nesting at the same time. We knew that was going to be important because maybe nest boxes weren't going to work out. Maybe we can't have nest boxes up forever. So where are these birds nesting naturally? And to be honest, we couldn't find much. Maybe I want to say in the 3 years I was there, we found 5 to 6 natural nests, and we did a lot of hiking and a lot of searching. So you see in the upper left, there's a nest under an awning on an old building. There you can see in the center there's a swallow that's landed up in an old concrete structure. Bottom center, there's a bird that's trying to nest in a clump of branches up in a Hispaniola and pine. That was unsuccessful. Bottom left is an interesting one. You can actually see the yellow gape there. That's a chick. And that is in a bauxite mine in another part of the Dominican Republic. They're actually nesting in earthen banks down there. And I will get back to that, but that's a really neat little thing in of itself. What we realized is that the nest box was the way to go. That we would put up a nest box in a new field, and there were cases where within 5 minutes of walking away from that nest box, a pair of swallows would land at the hole investigating it, which was really interesting. And it really got us thinking a lot about cavity limitation and whether or not that was a huge problem. So one of the neat things is you can see the map there in the upper left corner, in that center square there in the main mountains of the Dominican Republic, the Cordillera Central, is where we had our big study. But then in the southwest corner there in the Barruco Mountains, there were actually golden swallows nesting, not many, about 10 pairs, nesting in these earthen banks of old abandoned bauxite mines. And bauxite, of course, is one of the components that they extract to make aluminum out of. And a huge problem for the Caribbean in general. Bauxite mining, and as you guys know, in Jamaica is a huge issue. So what's interesting, you can see these photos here. The one on the left, you can see a nest up in a hole. And you can see is what we actually decided to do here, because there are only about 10 pairs nesting in this region. We said it'd be really neat to put up some boxes here and see if these birds take to the boxes as well as the birds on the other side of the island. Now, the interesting thing is if you look at that map between the two study sites, you'll see a really low-lying area running east to west. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but it's right through there. It's between the study sites. And we're not really sure, and this is something that's ongoing, that we're trying to figure out whether or not the populations are actually mixing. I have a feeling they're not. They're not crossing these low-lying valleys and going up into the other mountain range, which between the two sites, you're talking about 100, 125 miles, somewhere in there, depending. So it's not that far of a distance, but there are signs of allopatry that we've looked at. So the first thing I noticed when I went to these bauxite mines after about a year of being at the other study site is that the swallows sounded different. I could tell. I had been around the other swallows the entire time, and as soon as I heard these other ones, I said, something's off. Sure enough, we looked at sound, and it was different. The call was different. Obviously, the nesting is very different. And the other interesting thing is we left boxes there for 2 years and never had one of the swallows nest in one of our boxes. They did check them out. There was one nest they tried to build in one, but it failed. They never took to the boxes. So they were really cued into just random holes throughout. throughout that bauxite mine. So I want to show you a little video clip. I'm just going to skip around to a few different spots so you can see these birds flying around a little bit, and also see some of the different spots that they were nesting in between the nest boxes and some of those natural spots. So make sure you have your volume on. You should be able to hear this. So those are the birds on our boxes, and they loved them. They'd sit them on all day. They had a big approach. They're out in the field. They didn't feel like there was a predator nearby. They'd sit on top of the boxes and sing, or on top of the net, on top of the posts. Worked out very, very well. You can see the pines in the background. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit here, show you a couple other things. Chicks. Those are the chicks aging, starting to get some feathers. And there's a chick that's about to fledge. Beautiful little birds. I want to zoom ahead just a little bit more and show you
Justin, we lost your sound. Justin, we can't hear you anymore.
Not hearing.
Yeah, not sure what happened. That's strange, isn't it?
Yeah, very strange. Yeah. Lisa, can you call him on his cell phone or?
Yeah, let me call him. So he probably has his phone on mute, so he isn't hearing it. I just sent him a WhatsApp message too. But
Right.
again, I'm sure attention. How can we get his attention, I wonder?
Yeah. Keisha?
What do you see the chat? If we put a message in the chat to everyone?
Yeah, I sent it.
Yeah.
Keisha?
Yes, Leo.
Stop the feed for him, and then hopefully he'll have to rejoin. He'll know he's no longer presenting.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan.
Well, sorry about that, everybody, but we hope that Justin will be able to join us very soon.
Oh, I should be back. Am I here?
Okay. Yes, you're back.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, it just said recording in progress. Can you see my screen, Leo?
Yes, we can see you and hear you now. So we
Excellent.
lost you just when you were speaking about the, I think it was the nest boxes and
versus the bauxite mine nest.
yes.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're back. Sorry about that, guys. So I was just talking about how awesome these nest boxes turned out to be, and really an excellent tool for community engagement. People would see these boxes and want to know what's going on in these boxes. They'd want to grab a pair of binoculars, watch the birds. It was just a really nice, tangible way to connect with birds on the landscape. And so we had a lot of fun putting these boxes all over the place and had a lot of great success with getting kids involved, with getting the community involved. Actually, the park guards, the military, everybody up in that area was pretty excited about these swallows. So we felt really good about it. Now, one thing that's really important, and this is going to be really important for talking about your Jamaican golden swallow, are the problems that we encountered. What are the limitations of the success of these Hispaniolan golden swallows?
Sorry, Justin, your screen is not being shared.
Ooh, okay.
Yep.
Let me share it again. Thank you. How's that?
Perfect, thank you.
It must have reset me. Sorry about that. So the limitations to the Hispaniolan golden swallow success were very much tied up with two main things. Weather. The weather at the top of those mountains in the DR is pretty extreme, especially the rain events around the breeding season. And we found that that could be a huge problem because when it's cold and rainy for 3 or 4 days, it means that there are no insects in the air. And if there are no insects in the air, there's nothing to eat and there's nothing to feed your chicks. And those chicks need to be fed hundreds of times in a day. It's incredible the amount of visits the adults make to the nest. So weather was an issue. The other really big issue, and even a bigger issue, were the invasive mammals. So the rats, the black rats, and the Indian mongoose could devastate a population in a night. So when we left a few boxes on trees, what we found was once the weather improved, once the winter was over, and the rats and the mongoose became more active, if we had one come through the study site, it would often take down absolutely every box that it could find. It would go in, it would smell the chicks, and it would consume them. And so we lost, the mortality rates were the highest to these invasive, introduced invasive mammals, which is an issue we're going to want to talk about with your Jamaican golden swallow as well. Okay, so let's go over to Jamaica. About the time I was wrapping up my 3-year master's study on the Hispaniolan golden swallow, I got a call from Gary Graves, who's the curator of birds at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. And Gary said, "Hey, I see you've been studying the golden swallows over on Hispaniola." He said, "I've been spending about 20 years looking for them over here in Jamaica. Would you like to come and look in the last few places where I have not looked?" And I said, "That sounds amazing. Let's do it." So Gary had actually just written a paper, I think it was in 2014, talking about the historical decline and probable extinction of the Jamaican golden swallow. And so he asked me to come in and take the last few remaining remote places he hadn't gotten to and really hit them hard. And it's so that we could more definitively say, you know what, the swallow is here or it's not. And so that's exactly what we did. This exceedingly lovely little swallow whose plumage reflects the radiance of the hummingbirds is found in the higher mountains. And of course, that is a quote from Goss himself in 1847. And the specimen you're seeing there is actually the only Jamaican golden swallow I have ever seen. That's a specimen from the Lab of Ornithology in Ithaca, New York. And so what did we do? We said, well, Gary, this sounds great. We'll meet you down there. And I put in a doppelganger in the bed so my wife wouldn't know I was going to take off for 2 months, and packed the bags, and we rounded up an awesome team. 2 of the best guys I know, John Zeiger and Seth Inman. And basically I wanted a field team, a small field team that we could take in there who could physically and mentally handle what we were about to try to do, which was to go into some really remote places and spend a lot of time off the grid and hack through a lot of bush, basically. And you're spending all day long staring up into the sun, looking at all the aerial insectivores up there, mostly swifts, and looking for these golden swallows. So it was a pretty daunting task. And you'll see on there, the yellow dots are all of our survey points. We did 634 standardized census counts, and we walked 400 kilometers of trail in total. And so we lost a lot of weight, and we got to see some really, really amazing corners of Jamaica that I'm so lucky to have seen. And I fell in love with Jamaica. I have to be honest, it's one of my favorite places in the world. And I'm going to show you a few reasons why. So you'll see the spots that we hit are really centered around two main areas. And that's, of course, cockpit country in kind of the central west, and then the Blue and John Crow Mountains in the southeast. And we really focused on these areas because we knew from Gary's census work that he had done for about 20 years that we weren't going to find the swallows anywhere else. We needed to go to basically the last two strongholds of where these swallows had been documented in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. And so those are the regions we hit particularly hard. And I just want to say that the broadsheets, the Goss Bird Club broadsheets, were an invaluable for charting our course. This is what we did. Before we went down for about a month, we read through every broadsheet we could get our hands on. And we looked at all the major things we might want to know. We looked, okay, Cane Fields, Trelawney, Ram Goat Cave, what's that? Where is that? Barbecue Bottom Road, need to go there. Golden swallows circling with cave swallows. We picked out all these things from all these broadsheets and came up with basically an itinerary of all these high priority places we wanted to hit and all the important information to go along with that. So obviously if people are seeing golden swallows a lot with cave swallows, well, we want to go where the cave swallows are, and we want to watch those flocks carefully and see if there's any possibility there's a couple golden swallows still mixed in. So that's what we did. And we started in cockpit country, and which was just an amazing, formidable place to study birds. And I included this picture on the right, which gave me a big kick. That is an actual map that was drawn for us by one of the locals we met in cockpit country of where he thought the golden swallows were. And you can see the line actually just kind of swerves off the page, which was the best part of that. And that didn't end up taking us to golden swallows. It did end up taking us to his house, which was pretty cool because he's the first one to ever introduce us to how good it tastes to chew on a piece of sugarcane, despite all the problems of sugarcane, of course. But what I'm trying to get across here is the fact that this project was made even more awesome by the people we met. And we met nothing but smiley, kind, wonderful people in Jamaica. I cannot say that enough. When people ask me about my time in Jamaica, I tell them that we were in the middle of nowhere the entire time. You know, we could have had tons of problems with safety, with other things. We were carrying around very expensive cameras, et cetera, et cetera. We could have had tons of problems. We didn't have a single problem. Month after month in the middle of nowhere, people were so kind and excited about what we're doing and wanted to be involved in some way. I have nothing but good things to say about the people there. So what a great experience. Cockpit country, you can see me there in the red shirt on the left. It is dense. If you've ever been in there, it is intense. And it's hot and humid and tough to get through. But we crossed it several times on foot and went into some really neat places. And usually what we'd want to do is try to find a high place with a view that we could get to really do full scans, because your swallows aren't going to be flying through thick forests. They're going to be up above or over your clearings. That's Seth on the right, waking up on a normal morning, just covered in his own sweat from the night before from the tent because it was nice and hot in there. But we enjoyed ourselves. So this would be a typical morning, for example, waking up in our little tents. We'd oftentimes stay up really late at night looking for birds and owls, and in the late evenings watching white-collared swifts spin overhead. I mean, just being out there to do nothing but look for birds all day, all night was a really cool opportunity that I missed, to be honest, to be able to take that chunk of time and do nothing but that and hike around. So these are some scenes from cockpit country. Now, so again, we use the broadsheets and a lot of the information there to target certain areas. And one of those areas that turned out to be one of my favorite places in the world was Barbecue Bottom, was in the Ram Goat Cave area of Barbecue Bottom. So Audrey Downer and Robert Sutton had written in the 70s that they had seen golden swallows there. And they had talked about this Ram Goat Cave in this area, and we wanted to check it out. And we said, well, this was the last place, actually, the golden swallows, the Jamaican golden swallow, was ever ever documented. So we're like, we need to really focus on this area for a little while and see what we can figure out. Even if they're not there, what can we figure out? Why were they there and why are they not now? So we got really interested in this ram goat cave. And I'll show you some more about that in just a second. I want to show you, I want to immerse you in this barbecue bottom area first, because it is something truly special. And you want to turn up your volume here so you can feel like you're there. This is a video. That mist is moving. You can hear the parrots. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. What an amazing place. This is the last place that the Jamaican Golden Swallow was ever documented. So we spent a lot of time there and we looked around a lot and we found Ram Goat Cave. Now, for those of you who are in Jamaica, maybe you've heard of Ram Goat Cave, there's a lot of misinformation about Ram Goat Cave. I ended up writing a blog article about it to try to set the record straight, because we went to a lot of wrong places looking for this Ram Goat Cave, which is where these swallows had supposedly been seen. And we finally found it nowhere near where it was described. It is actually beneath Barbecue Bottom Road. Barbecue Bottom Road straddles the cliffside. And so on the picture on the right, Barbecue Bottom Road is actually above that, back in that forest. Ram Goat Cave is there, just hanging on the side of this cliff. You can see us looking at it from a distance. Impenetrable bush to get there. But we did observe it for a couple days to see if there was any activity, and there wasn't. There weren't even cave swallows around the area. But it is interesting to think about this cave being maybe a last stronghold for the Jamaican Golden Swallow, thinking that it was a place that was dry, a place where they could make a nest. If they were foraging with cave swallows, there might have been cave swallows nesting in there as well. So that was a really neat area to explore, but unfortunately no luck. That's the cave up close. We don't know how deep it is. There's a caving society in Jamaica. They have rappelled down close to it, but they have not gone in it. They think that it's very shallow. I don't know. I don't know how deep it could go. There could be some bats in there. There could be some other neat things. So then we headed over to the Blue Mountains and the John Crow Mountains. Had a lot of great help over there from the JCDT. Worked a lot with their maps, looking at where we could go, how to get there. Possibilities of swallows, where there's agricultural clearings, and spent a lot of days just working on logistics with them, and then basically went back out and got to some really amazing places in the mountains. So we would hike for a day all the way through thick forest just to get to a mountain peak to be able to have a view that hopefully nobody else had ever birded from, or somebody who wasn't looking for swallows or swifts, and just saw some of the most incredible things. And did point counts along the way, so we collected a lot of really valuable bird data as well. That's us having a little snack there, taking a break. Found sometimes once in a while, a flat place to throw the tents, get a good night's sleep, and we kept going. One of the most amazing places was Syncona. If you haven't been there, I highly advise you to go. It's stunning. And actually from Syncona, there are some really old pathways you can take that don't look like trails anymore. You can take up higher into the mountains there and get into some really neat spots that look like this with tree ferns. So we camped under some just unbelievable groves of tree ferns. I feel like we were in places that people hadn't been in a long, long time, because the trails had been in Jamaica, what do they call it? Bush up, right? They bush up. It was almost impossible to walk through them or identify where these trails were. They hadn't been cleared in a long time. And so we got to some neat places and found some really cool birds. But all in all, at the end, and I think this was a photo from the trip towards Ambassador, which we realized was going to have to be on foot. The car's not getting over that. I don't know how it looks these days, but that was a pretty neat place to explore up in there. And yeah, we hiked all through there. And what we realized, at the end of all this survey work is we don't think they're there. it would be extremely unlikely for any Jamaican golden swallows to persist. First of all, and here's a few reasons why. They're not cryptic. It's not a cryptic bird. These birds are flying around meadows. They're very vocal. They're very chatty. They're very curious. At the same time, it's almost been 40 years since we last saw one. That's a lot of time, and a lot of people have birded Jamaica in that time. There's no evidence of their migration off Jamaica. In other words, we've never seen them anywhere else where they could be holding out. There have been focused search efforts for 2 decades between Graves's work and our work. And the areas that historically supported these swallows are like Windsor and Barbecue Bottom and Trelawney Parish in general have been subjected to hundreds of hours of observation with nothing but negative results. So unfortunately, we really don't think they're around anymore. Is there a possibility there is some big estate somewhere in Jamaica, maybe a 100-acre old farm estate where there could be a remnant population that just is resident there in that one spot year-round, mixed in with some cave swallows? I don't know. There's a really slight possibility, but by this point, 40 years later, it's going to be a really small troubled population if there is one. So here's where we get down to the nitty gritty. So what happened? What happened to your swallow? Why aren't they there anymore? And when you start thinking about all the different things that are contributing to aerial insectivore decline, and aerial insectivores are declining across the board. I think most the authorities have them being the second most at-risk guild of birds behind grassland birds. There's an amalgam of different reasons as to why they're troubled. Pesticide use is a huge one. We've become really, really good at killing insects, and we know that the scientific literature is really hitting that hard. You know, obviously there's a lot of work being done with pollinators now, but we've destroyed their food supplies. There's no doubt about that, and the food supply that's left is often poisoned. That could be a really big reason. Changing in farming practices, wetland reduction. Of course, wetlands are really good at producing aerial insects. That's their food. Climate change and big weather events. I mean, one thing you want to notice here is that between 1950 and 1990, Jamaica had 4 big hurricane events. Hurricane Charlie came right across the island in 1951. Interestingly enough, this period of time from the 50s, 60s, and 70s was when this swallow was really thought to decline quickly. So it's possible that those big weather events hit them hard. Maybe not only reducing nesting cavities, so snags, knocking down a lot of trees, but also disrupting food. When a hurricane comes over for 3 or 4 or 5 days, you know the weather changes, it's windy, it's rainy. That's long enough to kill off a lot of these aerial insectivores. They can't go that long of time without food. But the one thing I really want to bring up that I think personally, from what I've seen in the Dominican Republic, is one of the biggest reasons that another big contributing reason for the Jamaican golden swallow was probably the mongoose and the rat. Those guys have been around for a while. Obviously, the mongoose was brought into many islands to help control the rat. Unfortunately, one's diurnal, one's nocturnal, so they don't even see each other in a given day. And there are many accounts of the fact that mongoose were afraid of the rats. When they'd watch them actually encounter each other, the mongoose would flee. So that plan didn't work out well. Either did the cane toad. But and so I really think they're just incredible predators. I've watched them at work with the golden swallows in the Dominican Republic. The rats can climb trees, they can climb nest boxes, they get in there, they can squeeze into a hole this big. And the mongoose are really savvy as well. The mongoose actually are a problem in the bauxite mines in the Dominican Republic because they can't climb trees as well, but they can climb into those tiny holes in the mines. So a lot of issues to think about. But here's the really interesting question that we started thinking about 2 or 3 years ago when we started looking back at some more of the broadsheets and really thinking about this. The question comes up, was the Jamaican golden swallow actually ever numerous? And if you look at the records, you start questioning whether they were or not. So you look back at William Osborne's 1858 quote where he talks about observing 200 to 300 of these birds foraging low over sugarcane fields and meadows in Trelawney Parish. Now that's interesting because that right there set the metric for gauging historical population sizes. So a lot of people would say, well, you know, they used to be abundant. We used to see a lot of these birds way, way back. Well, did you? That's the question, because we birded a lot around Trelawney over sugarcane fields, and what we saw a lot of were cave swallows, flying and behaving a lot like Osborne was describing the golden swallow. Mind you, in a lot of the accounts, in most of the early accounts, cave swallows are mixed with golden swallows. They're foraging together. It's very possible that what Osborne saw at the time were a few pairs of golden swallows mixed with cave swallows. He might have seen the white flash of the belly, which would be a very obvious distinction. And he might have assumed that those were all golden swallows. It's possible, we'll never know. But it's very likely, based on everything else we've seen, and we've seen where these cave swallows are foraging, and it's very often over these sugarcane fields. So the interesting then is, beyond Osborne's claim, the swallow has never been formally recorded occurring in flocks larger than 20 individuals, ever, in any of the literature. And by the mid-1950s, one was seen, then several, then 7, then 6 to 9-ish by 1982, and those were the last sightings. So the question then becomes, when you look at this, could it be that this race, that the Jamaican golden swallow, was actually the result of a recent small-scale radiation from Hispaniola that never was able to firmly establish itself? So, for example, the story would go maybe late 1700s, huge hurricane sweeps across Hispaniola, grabs 20 or 30 Hispaniolan golden swallows, deposits them in Jamaica. The population does well for a little while, finds a little niche to exploit. Maybe they get their numbers up into 50, 70, 100 individuals. But over time, all the other factors working against them eventually just sends that population down. It just can't sustain itself. It's a theory. It's interesting to think about. You put that in the context of some of the other avian extinctions from Jamaica, and there's a good quote by David Lack. How long the native birds of Jamaica will survive is doubtful, though as yet only 2 species of land birds have become extinct and 2 others are rare. The record is, however, far better than that for nearly all other islands in the world, and could be maintained, since conservation could save the remaining species by keeping parts of the 3 main forests intact. And that was written in 1976. And I really kind of like the way he ends that, saying that there is good hope here, right? There have been some extinctions, but there's hope. And so these are some of the birds that have been lost from Jamaica. I think this is actually a comprehensive list, maybe not all the way down to the subspecies level. So there have been some losses, but I think the way we want to kind of wrap up this talk today is thinking about the fact that others can be prevented, right? And I think they can. Now look back at a lot of the probable causes for these other birds going extinct, and a lot of it has been attributed to those invasive mammals. That's a big deal. That's a big takeaway point from today as far as an action item for the future. So what do we need? Where do we go from here? We probably lost the Jamaican golden swallow. The one in Hispaniola is holding on. We've got a population over there, but it's also very vulnerable. We need baseline data. I can't stress this enough. The broadsheets are an amazing resource. We need to take that another step further if we can, and really encourage more research in Jamaica, especially focused on nesting habitats historically and currently being used. So not only do we need to look at where swallows and swifts right now, if we're going to focus on areas like where they're nesting now, but where did they used to nest and why aren't they nesting there anymore? Are they not nesting there anymore because of development, because of a road has been built nearby? Can we reclaim some of these old nesting grounds? We need baseline data. We need a sweep of the island to see where everybody's nesting, and I think it's very doable. Study, document, protect, and educate. Continue to push people to use eBird to document nesting, especially when they see a swift fly behind a waterfall in Jamaica, which they do. The swifts are amazing and they nest there. You have a bunch of nesting swift spots. Document that. Where are they nesting? Give details. Throw it into eBird. These are your rainbirds. You walk around Jamaica and you ask people about swifts and swallows, and the conversation quickly becomes the Jamaican rainbirds, right? The birds that come out before the next big storm. And those are your swifts and your swallows. And people know them. A lot of, people, small communities, they know those rainbirds, maybe not by specific name, but they know what they represent, and they are known. And that's, we thought that was really, really special. So those are my suggestions. And I want to kind of wrap it up here with a couple just collages of beautiful photos of your rainbirds. And so these are your cave swallows. And if you haven't gotten a chance in Jamaica to see any of these big colonies of cave swallows nesting, it is one of the most incredible things to see. We saw a lot of this, especially along the limestone coast. They are a lot of fun to watch and beautiful birds. Remember, they're aerial insectivores, right? They depend on insects that are in flight, that have emerged and gone into flight. And so protecting insect populations is huge. These are your Antillean palm swifts, super special. And such a strange bird when you look at the range of it and why it doesn't go any farther east than the Dominican Republic and doesn't establish in Puerto Rico. It's very interesting. These are such fun little fast birds to look at, and they're just so cool. They're such a tiny little swift. We had a lot of fun watching these guys. These would mix with cave swallows, and they'd also mix with these guys. These are black swifts. There's a lot of interesting information about there, whether or not they are breeding on Jamaica, and I would say they probably are. I think I might know a location or two. We didn't see many of these guys. I think a lot of them are migrants, but I do believe there might be a resident population as well. And then, of course, my favorite are the white-collared swifts of Jamaica. These guys are incredible. They can fill a sky, and we saw them in groups of 300, 400, 500 sometimes. And who was it? Wetmore and Swales, who had the great quote about these birds being able to annihilate distance, and that they can. These birds can be from one side of Jamaica to the other in minutes. They're incredibly fast, and just effortless flight. Beautiful birds, also aerial insectivores, of course, and nest beside or behind waterfalls. Here's some more pictures of them gliding by. And so I want to leave this with there's hope. You guys have a lot of great birds, a lot of aerial insectivores left to think about in ways to manage the habitat, especially the nesting habitat is super key to be thinking about. And so I'll wrap up there and not go on forever. And I just want to again say this work would not have been successful without the broadsheets. We read pretty much all of them, and there are a lot of them, and they are filled with a lot of great information, and we certainly appreciate all that work that's been done. And I want to also thank all these groups who were involved with this work, and it was incredible the amount of people who pitched in to be a part of this project over the years. A lot of great support from all the groups in Jamaica. Like I said, we had nothing but great experiences with absolutely everybody in Jamaica. Little plug at the end for BirdsCaribbean, the group, the nonprofit I work for right now. I sit on the board. I'm the vice president and work as managing editor of our journal. Check us out if you don't know us. We have a great newsletter that comes out, a great way to stay informed about everything happening with birds and ornithology and conservation of birds in the Caribbean. Can't tell you enough how great this group is, how much work they do, how dedicated they are. And Jamaica is a big part of this network. So please join our newsletter, think about becoming a member. This summer on the docket, our Trinidad conference unfortunately has been postponed. I'm not going to say canceled because we still want to get down there. This summer, we're going to join AOS for a part of their virtual conference, which will be fun. We'll have a symposium that we hope you can all attend. And then summer 2022, planning is already in the works to actually combine with AOS in an in-person conference in Puerto Rico, which should be a lot of fun because it's going to take kind of our smaller conference, combine it into a bigger one, and give a lot of our community a chance to network with a lot of new people. So we're really looking forward to that kind of different approach for that year. So with that, I will leave you with my favorite picture, which I actually have framed here in my office because it's so good. And that is a picture of me, Seth, and John just enjoying our morning oatmeal from Portland Gap, which if you've never been up to Portland Gap, on your way hiking up, you can stop and get some really good coffee. And then at the top, you can watch swifts just soar back and forth all day long over and through Portland Gap. And then obviously the hike up to Blue Mountain. It's one of my favorite places and nothing but great memories. So with that, I'll conclude and I can stop sharing my screen if you'd like, Leo.
Either way is fine, Justin. Thank you so much for a riveting presentation and again for taking the time to meet with us. I'm just going to invite our members, feel free to unmute yourselves. I saw some great questions from several people. I think, Damien, you had one of the earlier ones asking about the identification of the acoustic signatures, but feel free just to jump in and ask your questions and comment and share.
Sure. So I can comment. I didn't see the question, but it sounds like there's some questions about how we were able to look at acoustic signatures. So I worked with the sound department at the Cornell Lab of Vo and a woman named Emma Gregg, who's an acoustic specialist. And we looked at basically there's some really neat stats you can do to try to pull apart sound and look at different, we looked at a few different flight calls, and basically there's a really neat statistical package you can put them in to see whether or not there are noticeable differences and whether or not, of course, that's significant. And it was, the groupings were so far apart, it was like 0.0001 significant. It was pretty neat. And that work is still being done. We still need to do some stuff with that because we have more sound and more sound coming in. So I hope to have more on that in the future. That's one of the many ways we want to look and see if there is allopatry happening. Obviously we could, feather analysis would be another one. Blood analysis would be great too. The birds in the bauxite mines, the problem with this is we're having a really hard time catching them because they won't use our nest boxes. If they don't use our nest boxes, it's hard to have access to these birds. So challenging. That population's really challenging to work with.
Oh, Justin, sorry there, it's Damien. When I asked about the acoustic signature, other than that, I was asking if you could, for example, we're doing some acoustic studies here, identifying species. And I was asking, do you have a signature that you could say that this is the golden swallow, that you could differentiate from a palm swift or a great Antillean?
Sure.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, great. We have a lot of sound recordings. There are a lot of them are cataloged in the Macaulay Library, and we definitely have signatures and all that we could share with you. Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Because when we're out, we could use that to help to check.
That's a great idea. Yeah, I know a lot of people are using acoustics in really remote places right now to try to see if they can find some really elusive birds. So that's a great idea.
All right, thank you.
We have Ricardo who has raised his hand. Ricardo, please unmute yourself and go ahead with your question.
Okay, good evening, Justin. Ricardo here.
Hi, Ricardo.
I was just following up on Damien's question as to whether any sound recordings exist for our Jamaican golden swallow. I think I know the answer to that, but I'm putting it out there.
That's a good, I haven't been asked that question before, whether or not there was any documentation, any recordings of the Jamaican golden swallow. Would have had to have been from the late 70s, early 80s. Oh boy, I have never run across one. I would be really interested to looking into that further. I wonder if Ann Sutton's on this call. She might know. I wonder if Ann knows. That's
Yeah, I'm sure that Robert never made any recordings. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Okay,
would be. I don't think George Renard made any either.
I haven't seen
Okay,
it by
the
Renard.
reason
Yeah.
for the question was to try and figure out if it could have been closer to the southern population or the northern population in Hispaniola, since you noticed some differences in their calls. That was the reason behind the question.
Yeah, exactly. It was so that's a really good point, is that the Jamaican golden swallow could have sounded considerably different if the populations within Hispaniola themselves are sounding so different, noticeably so to my ear. Then it's very possible, that the call of the Jamaican golden swallow, especially if they had been isolated from the Hispaniolan population for, let's just say 100 years, 150 years, could be considerably different. Need to think about that, yeah.
And you were continuing to say something, Anne. Please go ahead. And you're on mute. But if not, I do see that there was another.
I was just saying, if both of them donated all their recordings to the Macaulay Library. So if there are any, they would be there.
That's really good to know. I'm going to have to double check on that, but I don't remember running into any, but I will double check. Thanks, Anne.
Emma, you had a question. Please unmute and go ahead.
Yes, I did. Hi, everyone. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Emma.
I may have missed this because I came in quite late, but I mean, just a basic question, how hopeful are you that the golden swallow might be around somewhere and hiding? I get the feeling that you're not very hopeful, but
I like to stay hopeful.
what are the odds?
Yeah, I mean, the odds are that we didn't walk every square foot in Jamaica. We picked the best places, and we had big views of a lot of landscapes and spent a lot of time in the areas that hadn't been surveyed extensively. That being said, basically my thought was what could still happen is there might be a big estate somewhere, 100 acres, 150 acres, a farm of some kind, maybe abandoned, who knows, where there is a small population that just doesn't move from there. Maybe they have everything they need there. The insects are good. They've got a place to nest, all is well, and it's the last dwindling set, you know. But again, it's been 40 years since we've seen one. So if there's a population there, it's small, and it's got to be struggling by this point because there's, you know, no genetic diversity happening there. So hopeful,
so it
but
could be anywhere on the island then. I mean, any kind of, obviously not on the coastal areas, I suppose. But.
Yeah, probably not coastal areas. You're probably looking at somewhere right on the, you know, foothills or bottom edges of the mountains.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll keep a lookout.
Please do. And I want to know, there was one sighting that somebody thought they had seen one, and I was really close to getting on a plane, but it turned out not to be one. So just make sure if you do see one, you're confident before I pay that money. Yeah.
Yes.
So Justin, to add to that point about the genetics, was any work done on the museum samples from the Jamaican Golden Swallow?
No, we haven't pulled blood or feathers from anything. And there were a few reasons why. We were really concerned for the first year or two with the Hispaniolan population that handling the birds much was going to cause abandonment. And we really wanted as high of numbers as possible to take to our boxes. It was really more of it really had a strong conservation component to it as well. We didn't know how big the population in Hispaniola was, and it really isn't that big. And so our handling of the birds was quick morphology measurements and back out and trying to reduce abandonment. We did have the birds do not like to be handled. Some swallows, some tree swallows I used to handle for minutes at a time, and there'd be no problems, they'd come back. The golden swallows, smaller birds, more delicate, did not like to be messed with, to be honest. And so we didn't take any blood from them. And we obviously never caught one in the Barrucos in the mines. So no, that is all. I think we're at a point where if someone had interest in doing some genetic analysis between the populations, that we are set up in a good way to do it. And I think the timing is right at this point. So if there was interest, I would be happy to try to help facilitate that. Be a really neat study to look at the populations within Hispaniola themselves and see if they're geographically isolated and genetically isolated.
Okay, because as you mentioned that you could get genetic information from the nest boxes, couldn't you? In between occupation by nesting adults, or is it that once they're in the box, it's always a full house?
No, yeah, you can do that. Absolutely. I mean, some of those birds would nest twice, usually over a course of 4 months in the late spring, early summer. You have access to the birds in the box. You could do some quick handling. You could pull blood. In the bauxite mines, we'd have to do some net trapping over top of those holes, which would be doable. You'd probably wait for one to go in to feed the chicks and then just throw a net over it as it comes out, kind of like they do with chimney swifts and things. So it's doable. It's very doable. It'll be easier where there's nest boxes, and it's possible. I haven't visited the boxes in the Southwest in a little while. It's very possible one or two have taken to a box down there as well. So the boxes make it easy.
And last thing with that, do you have any idea, or I don't know if anyone in here does, maybe Emma, if the Institute has any specimens, or how many specimens do they have, if it's a scarce commodity, or are there any collections outside of Jamaica that you could get genetic information from the Jamaican population?
I have a list that I could share with you. I do believe I'll have to dig for it, of all the specimens that exist. And if I remember correctly, there aren't many. But obviously I do know that one is in Ithaca, New York. But there is a short list of a couple others. I don't know if there are any on Jamaica. That's a good question. Others might.
Damani, I could ask. I will definitely ask, because there's a lot of hidden treasures at the Institute, as you probably know, the Institute of Jamaica. buried in the basement. So there might be, who knows? I will definitely ask them.
Oh, sorry. One more question, and this one I'm not sure the person got a chance to join, but they had asked this prior on social media. Are there any considerations and what would be the efficacy of potential reintroduction? If it is found that, let's say, the southern population was the same subset or subspecies as the Jamaican swallow, would there be consideration for some sort of reintroduction program?
That's a cool idea. That conversation came up a couple times. I think we kind of had mixed thoughts on it, to be honest. I guess if we did have some more genetic analysis, that would be enlightening. I think the question becomes, if you bring them back over, how do you protect that population? I think if you wanted to do it, if the money were to be invested and you wanted to do that and fly some over, you would probably have to set up nest boxes and get them to take to the boxes, because without the boxes and without the predator guards, unfortunately, these swallows are really vulnerable. So I think if you want to do it, you could do it from nest box to nest box. Now, Tachycynetta swallows are once they ingrain on a nest box, it's actually really incredible what you can do with that nest box. For example, there have been times where we've taken nest boxes for tree swallows where there's chicks inside of a nest box that was on a post, and the adults have been feeding the chicks, and we take the nest box, we put it in the back of a pickup truck and drive it down the road, and the parents will continue to feed the chicks as you're driving this box down the road. Pretty incredible. I've seen martins do the same thing in the Dominican Republic, where they have a nest in the mast of a sailboat, and as the boat is sailing, they continue to feed their chicks. So what I'm getting at is the fact there that it's very possible that you could take a nest box with adults and chicks in it, and if you could get it to Jamaica in a couple hours, it's possible you could set it back up and have them ingrained to that box in a new location, which would be that was the way we envisioned it happening.
Okay, Justin, we have another question from Doris. She's asking, could the Jamaican swallow have flown over to other islands or to the Americas due to those 4 big hurricanes that you made mention of?
Sure, very possible. It hasn't been reported anywhere yet. A possibility would be Cuba. People have hypothesized for a long time that the Bahama swallow, for example, whose winter range and things like that are still very much unknown. It's another Tachycynetta that's endemic to an island, the Bahama swallow. Where are they during the winter, for example? And they get moved around by hurricanes all the time. So there's thought that they could possibly be in the far southeast corner of Cuba or something like that, a place that doesn't get a lot of birders. Possible. Yeah, for sure. Big storm events can do some crazy things.
Okay, so we're gonna wrap up now. So Justin, we'd like to say a very big Jamaican thank you for taking the time out to present this very, very interesting information. And we do hope that the opportunity exists for you to come back and do some further work. And if you do, we're looking forward to that presentation as well. There was a unrelated question from Sharon, who was asking if Jamaica has an Audubon Society. Well, we at BirdLife Jamaica, we consider ourselves the organization here who we want to be the ones to forefront the education and conservation of birds. So it would be us, and we can be contacted via email at birdlifejamaica@gmail.com. We'd like to thank our partners from BirdsCaribbean who joined, all the members, the visitors, the students from the University of West Indies who joined as well. And just a reminder that BirdLife Jamaica will be having its February outing to Iva in Jacks Hill on the 28th, and also to save the date for our next webinar March 18th, which will be in the form of a panel discussion about invasive species and the Jamaican bird population, the Caribbean bird population. Over to you, Leo.
Thank you, everybody. And just to quickly share that graphic with you for the presentation in March. We have some incredible presenters that will be spending some time with us. Natalia Lawrence, Wayne Smart, and the iconic Joseph Wonderly, who has been doing incredible work for so many decades across the Caribbean. Thank you again, Justin, and thanks to everybody. Thanks to the board of BirdLife Jamaica, and thank you to the president of BirdsCaribbean, who is joining us this evening. Adriana, if you're still there, could you just say hi to everybody for us? I'm sure if Adriana is still on the call. Well, perhaps Adriana is no longer there, but she was on up to a few minutes ago. Thank you, everybody, again. Have a great night, and looking forward to seeing you all on Zoom very soon.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again, Justin.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Good presentation, Justin. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Yes, bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.
Great work, Justin.
Thanks, Leo, and thanks to BirdLife for having me. I appreciate it. That was fun to go back and think about all this stuff. It gets me psyched about coming back down to Jamaica and doing some more work.
Absolutely. I think you have a few PhDs there that you could do on the genetics and everything,
at least
right?
20
Lisa?
of them. That's the problem. Yeah, I've got there's plenty of work lined up to do. I keep telling Lisa she needs to get me a BirdsCaribbean sailboat that I can live on and just go around the islands and get off and do a month or so of research, then get back on my boat, keep going. You know, we'll see. We'll see if that comes through.
Absolutely. Well, that's a retirement plan, you know, to win the lottery and just sail around and
Just sail around,
do
look at
research.
birds, do some fun research. No, I'm game. I really want to get back down to Jamaica and made a lot of good friends down there, and such a special place. Such a good place. Oh,
Right, you can look for the swallow while at the same time looking for the petrel.
Exactly. Yep. And there's also the you guys have a Proctor too, right? That
Yes,
hasn't been seen in a while. You know, I'll tell you this: the most wild place we went to, where I think there's some cool things happening, is the Swift River Valley, and that is on the north side of Portland Gap. So when you hike up from the south side, if you were to cross down into the other side, that's Swift River Valley. That is the wildest. All the trails that used to be there have bushed up. There's no way to really, there's a trail from the bottom that takes you up a little ways. And there's some agricultural encroachment.
yeah.
But if I was going to throw out some acoustic monitors in Jamaica, I would go to the Swift River Valley for sure. It's wild up there. I think there's black and white colored swifts nesting behind some waterfalls up there that you cannot get to. We got very close. It's so dense, so thick, and so steep. It's just impenetrable, and that's why I think it's still so wild. That's where I would look for the Jamaican Proctor is that if there's a possibility, but that area is pretty much untouched from what I've seen.
And when you were doing your work, you didn't have drones.
Yeah, we didn't have a drone back then. They become more common now. A drone would be great, to be honest, because some of these spots where these swifts are, where they're nesting, you just can't access.
That was one of my first thoughts when I saw the cave on the cliffside.
Yeah, you can't get to a lot of these places. Ramgoat Cave, I don't think anybody's ever flown a drone in there. That would be really neat to do. See what's in there. You might even be able to see some old cave swallow nests if they've hardened up in there. That would be neat to see. I don't think any Tachysonetta nests would survive this length of time. They're usually they can only be built on flat surfaces, and they're usually just sticks and twigs. But drones could open up some. Yeah,
there is this.
One second, Leo. Before we close, can you let Damien back in? He has one quick question for Justin.
I am not seeing him asking to join.
It was a question relating to invasive species and the golden swallow.
Right. Ask him to try and rejoin. I'm not
Okay.
seeing a request to join.
Oh, since he mentioned that, I forgot to ask you. I thought it during the presentation. Woodpeckers and parrots. Do we see that same type of predation by rats on birds that are nesting in other tree hollows? And why other species like that persist with the presence of the same predators versus the swallows?
Yeah. Some of these woodpeckers, though, believe me, they're pretty good at defending themselves.
Exactly.
They will.
That's it.
True, and parrots as well.
Yep, the swallows don't defend themselves. So I've watched it actually happen. I've watched it unfold as a rat comes into the nest box, and the swallows just go into the back corner like this.
Yeah, we had
There's no defense. Yeah.
We had the meeting.
Oh, how do you unlock it?
Where is the unlock feature? Where participants are, if you
Okay.
there, you should
allow
participants.
Invite.
Scroll all the way down.
Okay, I see it. Yep, I did.
Okay. You can rejoin now. The meeting is going to be unlocked.
Let me try doing that again. Let's see.
So the interesting thing going back to that question was, if you remember from my video, I showed a quick video of a Hispaniolan trogon nesting right beneath a golden swallow in the same tree. Our thought is that first of all, the snags are very hard to come by, but our thought is that swallow nest has survived because there's a trogon defending the nest below it, the cavity below it, from anything trying to come up that tree. Because that was the only instance we ever saw of a swallow in an actual, one of two, I think, in an actual snag. And we think it's just because they're so vulnerable. The rats just climb the trees and it's over. So if there's a trogon nesting right below you, it was probably defending the rest of the tree. That's our thought. Yeah.
One thing which I thought about mentioning, sorry, Damien, before you go, is that there is somebody at UWI, Mona, Dr. Thera Edwards, and she did her work in the Blue Mountains. And she says that the Blue Mountains were much more severely deforested than they are today during the 18 going into the 1900s, because there's remnants of like a train, which I didn't even know that there were trains going into the Blue Mountains.
Right.
That, because of yellow fever, everybody was kind of up there hiding, planting the coffee, everything was going on there. And a lot of what we see now is actually regrowth. So if the bird we're talking about, which you said is way up in Hispaniola, quite likely if it was way up there, there was a lot of going on at that time.
Yeah, I would agree. And a lot of the early records are from the Halliwell area, so pretty high up there and even higher in the Blue Mountain side. It's interesting though, because you go back over to Hispaniola and you look where the birds are where we don't put nest boxes. So where are they naturally distributed? And it's so random. It's just so random where they are and why they're there. And it's really hard to figure any pattern out, of where it almost just seems like little remnant populations that are holding on. And it used to be more, but it's just dwindled down into random little pockets. For some reason, they've just held on. And I really think it's just if you could look at the abundance of invasive mammals versus where they are, you just see that in those areas, somehow there just are very few invasive mammals. They just haven't gotten there yet. That's my guess.